Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group Roundtable, this time with partner veteran legislative voice. So today is Saturday, August 14th, 2021. In August, once again, is National Wellness Month. I am Sean Claiborne, National Guard veteran, filling in for Cliff Kelly and Dr. Damon Arnold. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our great digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. So our next segment of today, we have Miss Stephanie Kalota. She is a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class veteran and co-founder and creator of Veteran Legislative Voice. So we have a few things to ask her today, and this all ties in again to the National Wellness Month. Miss Kalota, are you with us today?
Yes, I am. I'm excited to be here.
I'm great that you're here. Your presence is my present.
Thank you. I do want to let you guys know there's a new thing that the VA has done recently. They recognized the 3 conditions as presumptives for anyone that had a tour in the Gulf in the Southeast Asia.
Wow.
And those are asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis.
Okay.
And they must have been diagnosed within 10 years of the Veterans Overseas Service.
Okay.
So that actually can be pretty awesome for a couple of vets that have had that issue around burn pits.
So you wanted to talk about stateside toxic exposures from PFAS chemicals. What are PFAS chemicals?
So they are certain chemicals that actually was used since the 40s, and they were in like Teflon pans. There's cosmetics, those type of things. They were utilized in various industries because of their ability to repel water and oil. And so this was also used in firefighting foam. Mm-hmm. So the firefighting foam has been really getting big in the media lately because it can go into the soil, it can go in the water, it can be in the natural life, and it actually has been found to cause cancer, cause high blood pressure, cause low fertility rates. And the pretty scary part is that, when a soldier or a service member deploys, there's some sort of acceptiveness that there might be toxic exposure when you deploy. Mm-hmm. They don't normally think about it when it's stateside, and most families military families live on post. And military installations have the highest concentration of PFAS than anywhere else in this country.
Why is that? So what caused what? I mean, I can see some of the use when he's talking about repelling water, things like that. I can see that being useful in the Navy, particularly because that's one of the biggest risks you have and being on a ship out in the sea is your ship catching fire with all the explosives and things that are there and then being a target also. But why is this particularly? And we also have this thing in the back of our minds. First thing we think of chemicals, in most people's minds, we think of Agent Orange. And what that caused during Vietnam.
Yes, and when they think of stateside exposure, a lot of people think of Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
So the PFAS in the firefighting foam is used within the hangars. So that's planes, jets, and helicopters. Mm-hmm. The Army has the highest amount of helicopters, mind you. So these are used and actually showered into a hangar and can fill almost all the way up. And that's what they do. They exercise it, and it puts out all of the fires that may actually happen. But the problem is the downside is that it makes the environment toxic.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this an oversight, do you see this as, or is this something that just wasn't on the radar? Is something that, that when we created these types of chemicals, why is it that we don't see it so much in the civilian world, but we're seeing it more so on a military basis?
Well, Pentagon officials have understood the risks of this type of firefighting foam since the early 1970s, when the Navy and Air Force studies first showed that it's toxic to fish. In the early 1980s, Air Force conducted its own animal studies on the firefighting foam, and in the early 2000s, the marker of the fluorinated chemical, which is PFOS, which is still in the same family of PFAS, the main ingredient in the firefighting foam exited the market. They stopped using it. And in 2001, the Defense Department memo concluded that the main ingredient with this firefighting foam is persistent, bioaccumulating, and toxic.
Wow.
But the problem is that the DOD waited until 2011 to warn service members about these risks.
And so once again, we have to come to that question. The obvious question is, why would you put soldiers and airmen and seamen at risk? Even though you're trying to prevent a fire, we understand fire safety, but why would you put them at risk when you have evidence, you have research that shows that this is deadly?
It's a great question, and I can't answer that for you in the minds of the general.
Everybody's mind. That's the first. I mean, we know we have to wrestle with this question. We know that it's not an easy question to answer, and it almost is one of those questions, almost a rhetorical question in a sense, because you almost want to say you know the answer, but the idea is but you can't really, you don't know the answer in a sense.
Right.
See what I mean? So it's like a catch-22, but the tragedy of it is that now you have people that are having these types of healthcare issues and things. And what are those healthcare issues that people are reporting? Are people coming forward now and saying, I have this, I have these symptoms?
Yes, and that's been becoming pretty big since 2011. It can cause liver damage, thyroid disease, decreased fertility, high cholesterol, like I said, obesity, hormone suppression, and cancer.
So how does a person, if they start having these symptoms, how do they know if this is something that I got maybe because I was handling certain chemicals? Because even looking at, for example, as a military veteran myself and looking at things I've done in the military, chemicals I handled in the military. I mean, the reflective paint on vehicles, the mosquito repellent they gave you that was left over from Vietnam. I mean, all the stuff that that you put on your body and things that you're breathing that you don't really think about. The depletion. Yeah. The depleted uranium in the tanks. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was also very big when I deployed to Kuwait. They were in the armor, they were in the artillery, and I transported that stuff. Mm. I was all over it. So there are a lot of concerns out there. There's actually a bill that passed the House, and it's H.R. 2467, and it's the PFAS Action Act of 2001. Now, what it does is that it requires the administrator of the EPA to designate these chemicals as hazardous substances under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act of 1980, and that's the quote-unquote, Superfund. What it does is that it makes it toxic, it outlaws anybody from making it, and then also requires reports and cleanup. Okay. I haven't found very much on the compensation portion, so I'm still researching it because it's a lot of material. Mm-hmm. But it's the first step, because after that is outlawed and recognized as a toxic substance, which is crazy, it hasn't been labeled like that yet. It's the first steps into getting to compensation and care. Mm-hmm. And the scary part is that it could be impacting the military families, the DOD civilians, DOD contractors. Mm-hmm. The guy that runs the Burger King on post could be impacted by this, and he or she might not have any availability through the VA disability. Wow. So contractors, they don't. What's their healthcare system like? So if you're a vet, I never thought about that, because if you're a contractor, because the people on post, you might have civilian shops and stores. Like there's the pizza place that serves pizza on post, mm-hmm. the Burger King, like you mentioned, or whatever. How do they get health care? Do they have to do their own health care? Are they covered? Can they use TRICARE or something like that? What do they do for health care?
Yeah, they're usually on their own with the health care. If you're a DoD civilian, you can get into the federal stuff, because I used to be a DoD civilian for the Army Reserve. There's the federal type of health care packages you can get. So like I was with the federal Blue Cross Blue Shield. Okay. So you have that. The contractors, it depends on the contracted companies that they go with. So it's a big variety. And so that also opens up the question of compensation and care. So that's the next step, is once it gets inputted on for the Superfund, the next steps would be actually trying to set out all the rules and regulations for that.
Okay. So if a person starts having these symptoms, or they question whether or not they've had certain levels of exposure, what should they be doing?
Mm-hmm. They should be contacting their representative, their senator, and finding and asking them to vote for this bill. It's now in with the Senate. So they need to contact both their senators. It's very easy to find. You can Google where's my senator, and the best way to contact them is by phone. If you do it by email or by mail, it's going to take a couple of months, even email, which is frustrating. Okay. If you call them directly and you let them know what you feel, how this is impacting you, and that how it would change your life once the bill is passed. Those things are very important for congresspeople to understand and to know, because sometimes they just don't know who is being impacted by it. And for those that think that these congresspeople don't have any sincerity for their own constituents, there's a lot of sincerity from these congresspeople. There's a story that was in the New Yorker back when Sandy Hook happened, and they were pushing gun control laws. There was this one congressman who was from a very red state. He asked his assistants and pretty much what are the feelings of his constituents, because they were calling to let them know, don't vote for it. I want to keep my guns, those things. But there was 99% were against the bill. One phone caller, because she actually had children in school and she was terrified.
Wow.
That person from a red state voted for the gun control bill because of that person's communication.
Wow. So
those things really do count for everyone.
So do you have any numbers or any places or any information of where they should call that you can advise our listeners?
Actually, on my website, VETS, legislativevoice.org, I have information of how to contact your congressman, examples for if you're going to write it or email or call. You have a little example script. And I have a few spotlighted bills, and this one is actually going to be published tonight. For this bill is going to be on my website. So it's VETS, legislativevoice.org.
And I think that's really incredible that you're doing this, because I've been saying this for a long, long time, is that we as veterans, because we have the experience, because we know what goes on in the military, we have the knowledge. A lot of people in Congress, a lot of them are not veterans. We're seeing less and less veterans in Congress. And the military population is shrinking as well. So we have like I think I was looking at the numbers the other day. It looks like there's about close to like 1.8, almost 2 million, less than 2 million soldiers in service right now. You have 20 million veterans, but about 2 million service members. During Vietnam, we had like 3 or 4 million.
Right, and that's so true. And it is the reduction in force, but it's also because of the technology and the things that we can do nowadays. The other problem is that with the veterans population has dropped 4 million in the last 6 years, and that's because of the Vietnam and the World War II and Korean War vets have been passing on. So that's the other thing, is that the constituent base is so much smaller. It is at the lowest point now of veterans for this congressional session is at the lowest point, and I believe the number is 14%. I can double check, but it's that small.
Wow.
There's stories during the last election of how many veterans, won in Congress, got their positions, those type of things. But it's just spotlights. It's not the full number of people that are going for office. And there was 80% of the Congress were veterans back in the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
It is crazy.
It's crazy. And you think about it, and we had a few civilian presidents as well. But
exactly.
And the thing that I think is so striking, though, is that you would think with the knowledge that we have and the awareness that we have, at least in academia, at least in, like I said, amongst the veteran population, that there would be more thought put into changing a lot of the laws. Like, for example, I think it's ridiculous the way the healthcare system is structured for veterans. Like I say this every single time. Whenever I get a chance to mention to people, when you get hurt at the job, if I get a job at McDonald's and I have healthcare at McDonald's, they're never going to argue with me and say, "Well, no, you didn't burn your hand on the fry machine. I just go to the hospital."
Right. Well, there's plus and minuses on how the Veterans Affairs run their business. It is very different for a lot of people. The one of the big things that I like about the Veteran Affairs is that it's the huge access of knowledge for your medical records. If you were not in the military, many people would understand experience that I've at least had when you had to go to the ER, you had to go to an urgent care, you had to tell them your entire life history. Mm-hmm. And for a veteran especially, has a very long mm-hmm. history, medical history. I believe when I got out at 15 years, it was, I think, 2.5 inches thick
wow.
by paper. Yes. Yeah. So a lot of people are like that. And when you go to the Veteran Affairs Hospital, like, for instance, I went to the urgent care one time. I had a terrible upper respiratory infection, and I had a history of pneumonia, blown eardrums, and some other issues. Just because I went in for an upper respiratory infection, those doctors knew my history, wow. checked each possible condition that I might have again, mm-hmm. and then gave me everything to then send me home. So okay. those things is really awesome to understand and to use. They're so connected because if you go to the ER, they set you up with an appointment with your primary care doctor within that week, or they try to within that week afterwards to discuss your issues. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things the VA there's a lot of bad stories about it, but they are making a huge advances in the last couple of years.
And there's also there's different levels of care. Like there's a rating system I know in the VA for a VA hospital. I think it's like a 5. I think I can't remember if 5 is good or 1 is bad. But every VA system, like the one in D.C., had a lot of problems. And there were even the healthcare workers that were working there tried to get it investigated and find out, get to the bottom of why things were going so wrong, horribly wrong at the one in D.C. Whereas here in Chicago, the Jesse Brown VA is highly rated, and people love the Jesse Brown VA. We're very fortunate here in Illinois.
Yeah, and one of the things that I live near Bay Pines in St. Pete, Florida, and the Bay Pines Hospital is awesome. Mm-hmm. But I've lived a different couple of places. So I've lived near Jackson, Mississippi, and that one was one of the lowest rated hospitals I've ever been to. The biggest thing that a lot of veterans, or at least patients of the VA, don't understand is that when you have an issue with the doctors, mm-hmm. you go straight to patient advocacy. Okay. And they can get it taken care of. And then if patient advocacy doesn't solve it for you, you can call your congressman. You can go higher into the VA hospital. You can report it to the region. There's a lot of big steps that you can get things taken care of when you have a bad experience. I had one primary or pain management doctor that told me to stop doing yoga and to start taking opioids for my issues.
Wow.
And this was in 2018. So after the opioid crisis was already pretty big and rampant. So I called my primary care doctor and reported them. And those things can actually happen and make an effect.
Oh, yeah.
It is a lot of veterans, because they were low ranked and had low responsibility. They're the guy mopping the floor and taking out the trash. Mm-hmm. Those people don't realize how much you can actually make an effect when you start telling people what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing about contacting your constituents. You have that power to let them know. And social media has been great on letting constituents know how things are actually happening. The hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen Act, hashtag Me Too, military Me Too, those things have gotten into the Congress people's hands and have those stories. And that's the reason why they're having hearings that is important to us as veterans or current military that makes effect on their day-to-day life.
If there was one legislative change or one law or even a repeal of a law that you could think of that would be most critical, that could really help and transform how veterans get their health care, and how veterans how veterans' health is even treated in the military and outside the military, what would that be? What law do you think should be on the books if you could have your wish list?
I would say the repeal of the FAERS doctrine, and there's another one.
What is the FAERS doctrine?
FAERS doctrine is more for the current military, but it's basically a person cannot sue the government or the military for anything that was done in negligence. Okay. Yeah, so there's been a lot of things that's been happening recently that's really have gotten out. So if military members were ignored during sexual assault or sexual harassment, and then they were injured severely because military members, commanders, did not follow through with their responsibilities, and those people cannot file any lawsuit over it. There's been service members, women, that have died during childbirth because of the negligence of the doctors in the military hospitals.
Do you think it's negligence, or was it more incompetence, or is it true just negligence?
It's a range. I would say both happens. I would have to look back on the story that I remember because there was a situation of a military member that had died from negligence, and also her baby was also injured during the labor because the doctor was not doing the proper techniques, proper procedures.
Wow. And you would think that in the civilian world, that would be malpractice all day long.
Exactly. But then there's no repercussions. There's no follow through on what happens to people that have these responsibilities and they do not act upon it.
And that's the part I really don't understand about the military. So, to me, it would be more cost effective even if you, for example, you made a mistake. You have this chemical that's out there, it's Agent Orange, whatever, that's killing veterans. To me, it makes more sense rather than paying death claims and lawsuits and with the technology that we have to treat the veteran, give them access to the health care that they actually need, make them better, rather than just letting them go through all kinds of problems and then having a bigger problem when they finally sue you guys or whatever happens down the road. Because I know there's been lawsuits by veterans brought to different parts of the military to get benefits and things like that. That costs money to do that. Yes,
there was one service member that won his case because the doctors completely ignored his test results for cancer, and I think for 4 years, the doctors ignored the reports that actually was a positive test for cancer. And he won, but the thing is that it's so limited on what can be done. It's not conducive for the rest of the people that are in similar situations.
What do you mean? I don't understand the part.
So for his it was complete negligence in that case for the positive test that the doctors never told him about or even acted on. So that part's negligence. But if the commander makes the wrong decision and ignore warnings of flash floods and make them continue on with the convoy, and the convoy was washed out by the river.
Wow.
And 9 people died, which happened in 2016 in Fort Hood, including a West Point candidate. This person wasn't even commissioned yet and passed away on the convoy. Although there are conflicted reports on what happened, but if it was actually true that a commander or a officer ordered them to continue on despite flash flood warnings, there should be some sort of repercussions on a leader like that.
That's sad.
But but because of FERS doctrine, they cannot.
Stephanie, I really appreciate your coming on the show and giving us this information. This is really powerful information, and I want to have you back at some point. We've got to have you back on the show and also explain again exactly the importance of the legislative part of being a veteran. We have a voice, so we have to get this information out there and start making some changes.
Well, Stephanie comes back every month. She's one of our partners.
All right.
Bravo, Stephanie. Yeah.
Okay.